start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we'll go on to the roll call.
Andy Mary,
Yes.
Jim Balzer,
Here.
Mike Boldig,
Here.
Noel Deep, Wayne Gagnon,
Here.
Jeannie Long, Mary Newfeld, Danny Pyatt,
Here.
JD Schrader,
Okay. And Tim, is there anybody signed in for public comment?
No.
Okay, and we'll move right on to new business. And item A is anybody wants to report on any legislative or meetings that they have attended.
May I give my
Did we skip the COVID update?
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
So we'll go back and do that.
Okay, well, thank you. So, as you know on our dashboard, Darlene keeps this updated daily for us. And I won't read the whole thing to you, but since the start of school, we've had 85 positive cases. And then you had asked last time that Darlene also update us on the numbers of quarantine students. So we have those to share with you tonight, although we didn't really get this under a systematic approach in terms of temporary remote learners versus straight remote learners who are home all the time, kids coming in and out. So what Darlene did put together for us, and she's here to answer questions, would be as of today, what our total is. So for temporary remote kids, so they could be positive or out on quarantine, 17 at East, 45 at North, 22 at West, 18 at the middle school, and 43 at the high school, for a total of 145. And that's down, we were in the 200 since the start of November, so we're down a little bit, but it would be naive to think that that trend could, continue downward.
Julie, excuse me.
Yes.
Is that students and adults?
That is students and adults.
Okay.
No, that's just students.
Just students, I'm sorry.
Those are the temporary remote.
Yeah.
Whenever a student goes out on a pandemic-related issue, and again, we label it that because it could be they're positive, they're out of quarantine, they're awaiting results, or something like that.
Okay.
So that is just the student count that we have out.
Oh, and it says right there, Mary, I'm sorry, I didn't see that. So Darlene, I know we have by school a list of staff. Do you have that number too?
I'm getting it right now.
Okay.
Just gonna name it in here.
While she's looking for that, I would like the board's input. As you know, Governor Evers' mask mandate is set to end soon, November 21st. I make the assumption, but I do want to check with you, that we would continue as a board, which was your decision prior to the mask mandate, to ask everyone in our schools to continue wearing masks until further notice. Would that be a correct assumption? Okay.
Yeah.
I think too, we have to be cognizant of the fact that the governor is speaking in about 5 minutes.
True.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he may make a change that we don't know about yet.
Okay.
But I will say that Mary and I visited the high school this morning. And we had just talked, and we wanted to go see how mask wearing and social distancing was. And I was pretty impressed by all students had a mask on, I think. And once in a while, somebody would have it pulled down, or it slipped down, but Mr. Rogers has, his kids are all trained, when they see the sign, they put their mask right back on to where it's supposed to be.
And don't roll their eyes when they do it.
No, it's just like, oh yeah, I forgot or something.
Yeah.
Depends upon if we're in the mask here or up here.
But anyway, that was all good. And social distancing, the distancing is pretty good, but once in a while you see kids that are a little closer, but it's better than what I thought it would be after
That's good to
a
hear.
quarter of
It was
time.
like tech ed, the kids were kind of, which is understandable. But, they all had their masks on and
They all had their masks on.
badminton and we saw all kinds of, everything was going on. Some of the rooms are a little smaller, so they're a little more crowded, but
Yeah, and I will add that they are really good when they see, all you have to do is just go like this. But when they see me coming, they go, oh, the COVID doctor's coming, so it's okay. We have 21 staff members out right now.
Thank you.
how many, I'm sorry,
21.
on quarantine?
They're out, we have 21 out currently out. As far as staff who are positive, 6, we have 8 staff members currently positive, or 6, I'm sorry, yes. 8 staff members who are currently out in isolation because of positive results.
Okay.
I just updated the dashboard again, so.
So as you know, we recently added students to our schools for second quarter. And at the elementary school, those principals and teachers had agreed long ago to add them as they expressed interest, especially at that young age. The middle school, I know, recently added 70, and the high school, the number escapes me, Clint, but it was up there too.
Yeah, it was close to 70.
Okay,
And we had like, it was in the 20s of people coming or going from in-person to remote, so our net total was like in the 40s somewhere.
okay.
But I can confirm that.
So what happened then, naturally, is some class sizes got bigger. And at the high school, they worked, as I mentioned last time, they created some remote sections, which alleviates some of the stress on teachers, but the trade-off then is what? More kids in their in-person classes. So there's always a give and take. The middle school, I know I plan to speak with Heather again this week. They had, as did the high school, some kids just show up in person. And they didn't go through our hopeful protocol of let us know what your intention is. So there was some scrambling there, but so far
The
we're,
middle school had any.
oh, the middle school did not?
They were projecting, but she
Oh,
said today they didn't. And
okay,
we're
good. Thank you for that correction. So anyway, we're doing okay. Start of second quarter is off and running, and we are now officially one-to-one with technology. Mark Kautza said that happened as of yesterday, November 9th. So now he will start the exchange of first graders' older devices with their new touch screens when they come in. So mid-November, not as good as we had hoped, but we're still there now. And finally, I would say that many of you have expressed, as we are feeling, anything we can do to help teachers and others with their stress level. We put out that after much discussion that I would call it a gesture of working remotely that week of Thanksgiving, 2 days, which are all professional learning. And we're receiving very nice comments. Again, it's a token or a gesture of understanding. We know how tough this is. And that seemed like a perfect way to acknowledge that, but yet we don't lose anything and kids they're not compromised in the process. So that is the COVID update.
Can I get it?
Go ahead.
I got a, you
guys know, I'm at All Saints half a day a week on the guidance council. They've decided to close the week after Thanksgiving, thinking that kids are gonna be traveling, they're gonna be meeting with groups, and to eliminate, to minimize exposure, they've decided to close and go virtual that full week. Have we thought about anything like that? I know it's kind of late in the game now.
We did discuss it last meeting. What our system or how we're set up, the worst part of it is the not knowing. So that race between that evening's understanding of who's positive and then the principal communicating with Darlene and making sure that we're staffed the next day, that's the worst part, and that is taking its toll on people.
Yeah.
Other than that, we had discussions like if they're off that whole week, we won't know where they're going.
Right.
So we thought it would be okay to keep our schedule, have them come in. We know that we have protocols in place to help mitigate. So you really can look at it two ways, Wayne, but we did discuss it just here during the COVID update. So I don't know if anyone else has thoughts on that.
Not on that, but I have another question.
Whatever we're doing, we must be doing something right, because I noticed news article that our neighbors to the west have closed a fourth building because of all of this. So, granted, it's a little piecemeal and it's a tough road to hoe on everybody.
It is.
But we're gonna come out on top, but we're succeeding because we still have all our buildings open. And I think that's a big positive, and it's a credit to everybody on staff and faculty that are doing their damnedest to keep them clean and keep them open.
We had a very significant discussion today. It is very difficult, and I would say again that Sunday night when Darlene is still working and trying to figure out who has to quarantine and then communicating with those families. That's about as stressful as it gets until the next day when then we have to make sure our coverage is there. So there is some thought about, well, how long are we going to continue applying a Band-Aid on coverage, if you will? And we don't have an answer for that. Some districts are saying, okay, we'll take these 2 weeks, but you heard the numbers tonight. Having been at North now the last couple days, and Heidi was there also, I can see what the in-person instruction is happening, and I'm very proud we can still offer that, even if we are limping along in some cases. But we are, tonight you'll hear, we're putting together a snow day proposal where, unlike every other time in history, learning doesn't end just because the weather doesn't cooperate. So you'll hear some of that, and perhaps we can Amy worked on a proposal tonight or today. We can share some of that if we would have to close, to make it as seamless as possible, or close an entire building like others have. So, Mary, I know you had something to say.
I was reading somewhere, I don't know if it was in one of our things from the state or what it was, but if a teacher has to quarantine or test positive or whatever the situation, they're allowed an extra 14 days beyond their 10 days allotted each month, correct?
So I'm going to give this a crack, Tim. Correct me if I misstep. So federal legislation allows 2 weeks of paid leave that have anything to do with quarantine. If one is still home and unable to work, then we would look at accumulated sick leave or something else so that they can still be paid, yes.
Okay.
However, that legislation ends with the calendar year, so in a month, in end of December. And we have not yet heard what, if anything, will replace it. So we've communicated that with staff, but I don't think you can over-communicate.
No.
Because as long as our rates are still on the rise, those who've used that, those 2 weeks and now would have to start taking from accumulated leave. And remember, that's only if they cannot work remotely.
Okay, so let's say I'm home, I'm on whatever, positive, quarantine, but I'm still working, I'm still having meetings, I'm still doing my thing. Let's say I'm not a classroom teacher. Let's say I'm, I don't know, well, art teacher, I don't know what position, but do they have to keep track of everything they do? Or are they just doing what they're supposed to be doing and knowing that they're doing, you know what I'm saying? Do they have to like fill out a diary or a log or something?
I think it really depends on what you're talking about. Just speaking from when I was at the middle school, so if I'm a normal classroom teacher, I'm logging in, I have an IA in my classroom facilitating the students while I'm doing the teaching. If I'm an IA, or a full-time IA or a part-time, and I'm doing work at home, we have had them complete like, here are your tasks, or giving them like, here's a list of things we'd like you to do, let us know how you did at the end of the day, and we'll see how tomorrow goes. If you're a specials teacher or someone like that, you can still do the login facilitation, or
But are you supposed to be keeping track and turning it into your building administrator?
I wouldn't have them keep anything additional other than,
doing their meetings,
We have like a spreadsheet
right.
that we keep track of if people are working from home and
We
tracking
are having
that.
some who log that are using some of their time to work and some of their time they're taking as sick or at home.
okay.
They are logging that because of their
And that would be like a
circumstances.
hybrid. Mhm.
Yeah, because they have a baby at home or something like that and they can only work 3 hours a day. So they're using what they can based on the fact that they're quarantined and they're also logging their work activity.
I would say, I don't know if I can say majority, but many teach. If they're a teacher, they'll log in and teach remotely while we have someone else
In the
in
classroom?
person. Right.
Okay.
So then they're really teaching a full day just from home.
Okay.
Mary and Andy saw, or talked to a couple of teachers that were examples of that today.
Mhm.
But if it's an instructional assistant that's quarantined, we do ask them to keep a log of different activities, because we may ask them to do some things that are outside of their normal duties, just because of their normal duties are specific to student contact.
Sure.
So,
Okay, so
And that might be the
that,
case for a counselor.
Pardon me?
So if a counselor's out, like if a counselor's out and let's say they aren't going to be teaching the regular classes, maybe, oh, I'm gonna do this activity instead because it's some other work that I need to do that I couldn't do and I'm not gonna be logging in during my normal. So they kind of come up with what their day might look like, because it might look differently for a counselor or a speech path or.
okay, so then do they have to log their hours?
They are, I mean, I think that, I don't know that they've been, you have to log every hour, but I think that they're keeping track.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Darlene, I have one question that I don't know if you can answer or not, but as a community, we were doing pretty good, but then we hit this big spike where we're the worst county in the state, and now we've dropped back off. Is there any reason for that
When we-
anybody's identified?
The only thing that I kind of put towards is, we had Labor Day where we had all these people driving up north through our county. We had, was there like some kind of a music fest?
Crandon Brush Run?
The brush run, and we had a lot of people.
That's right, there was a music fest.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, that is the only thing that I can, to be honest, state might be the reason why we saw such a spike. But I'm hoping we can continue to see it go down, it would be great. But that's the only thing that I could think of. When it comes to what we're seeing in the schools, again, it is still community spread, it is. I think we have one student that I'm not able to identify an outside source on at this point, not saying that they didn't come in contact with someone, but everybody else has had a parent or other family member who tested positive prior to them testing positive. And they were home in quarantine. and started with the symptoms when they were home, so. It's
Okay.
still considered community spread.
So somebody could argue that if a parent gets COVID, their kid would be better off in school.
Well, not really, because if their child is an asymptomatic spreader, then they are bringing it in and sharing it with anybody they are in close contact with.
Uh-huh.
One of the biggest areas that we end up sending students home is from the cafeterias, because you don't have your masks on, you know? So, that and now we do have a few more students in each of the classrooms. So when I have a positive student in a classroom, I call up and I ask if the students are farther than 6 feet apart. If they can't tell me they are, then I do, and the teachers respect HIPAA. So I do say, who has been within 6 feet radius of this specific student? And they will supply me names of people that I have to quarantine.
Okay,
So,
okay, thank you.
All right.
All right, one other thing.
Okay.
Back to my question. So FMLA doesn't have anything to do with this, correct? If I'm positive, I don't have to apply for FMLA, do I?
No,
No, unless,
there would really be extenuating circumstances.
and I've used up all my sick time and everything else, then, okay.
Mary, just as a follow-up, so we're following the guidance by the Department of Labor. And
Okay,
if you go to, I think it's Families First Coronavirus Response Act or something of that nature, and there's 6 questions the employer is supposed to ask. And essentially, you get 10 weeks of up to 2/3 pay for being quarantined on multiple occasions. So that's
Okay.
kind of how we're
Okay.
following it.
thank you, I'm done.
Okay. And so am I.
Okay, and now we will move on to item A, board member meeting or legislative report. Anybody has been to a meeting? Or has anything legislatively? No.
Nope, nothing.
Okay,
Can I
Yeah.
just ask one thing? Registration is open for the convention, and I'm wondering who would like me, or who would like to be registered. It's all virtual this year, so I didn't know if the whole board wanted to.
do you know what the fee is?
$240, and then depending on how many we have in our group, from 5 to 8 registrants, it's 10% rebate, and then over that, it's a 15% rebate. So the more we have, the less we have to pay. So if you can let me know before the board meeting.
Yeah, why don't you send out an email for the
Okay.
benefit of those who aren't here? And
Okay.
my thought would be that everybody could register even if they only wanted to take in 1 or 2 talks.
Yeah, latest copy of school news that came out had the roster of sessions that are gonna be available. So,
Mm-hmm.
So,
plus I wanna listen to Donna Pryor.
yeah,
I think he's probably gonna deliver a very inspirational talk. It's gonna be worthwhile for a lot of people to listen to.
so, yeah, just send out that email. The next item is board retreat.
So, everyone, with the exception of Wayne, would recall last year we met in this room actually with Barry Forbes, and he went through, it was called a retreat, but a board workshop from WASB. In fact, I brought his slide packet with me. So we had agreed at that time, the board had, that it might be good to revisit that same survey that you took, and then he went over results with us to see how we change and progress each year. So that would be the first link under administrative content. This is the flyer that talks about the board development tool. And I reminded Andy, there were some question about should we have Barry back or somebody else. So that's a consideration. So the first attachment is exactly what we did. The second one, WASB offers all of these customized trainings. So if we wanted to deviate and do something a bit different, that would be an option as well. So we were looking for your input this evening, and then if it is your wish, we can go ahead and move forward with scheduling something.
So as I recall, at the end of the 3-hour session last year, people weren't crazy about having Barry come back and finish up that portion that he didn't get to.
He was a nice man, but oh man,
You're just
But,
too long.
I guess we should start with the survey.
This guy, but kind of dry.
Every year, I thought we'd get a notice, I haven't received one yet, to do that survey, but is everybody in favor of doing the survey again? And then there's a fee to compile it into something that means something, and I think that was like $250. I assume we're willing to do that. And then as workshops go, I mean, there's all kinds of them here. I was looking through here, and there's a couple on data, which we always talk about data, but I don't know how many of us understand what we're doing with it. So that was one that I thought might be good, but if anybody has anything else that they thought was good there? Data's under board operations.
Yeah. I'm thinking community engagement, because if we're gonna get to the point, as we're gonna talk about tonight with budgets and stuff like that, and realizing that at some point, we're gonna need to consider the idea of potentially running an operating referendum, getting the community engaged early on may be somewhat advantageous.
Mike, where are you looking at community engagement?
The board development tool thing, it's third one from the bottom.
Oh, so we would score in that area, most likely it's on the survey, and then we would address that, okay.
Because, is this under board?
It's on that Andy, it's on that flyer, that annual board development tool.
Oh, okay, because there's also a couple here on, are you ready for a referendum? And part 1 and 2. That are specific to referendums, not that, I think, community engagement, it all goes together for sure.
Do they have all the workshops listed for the convention yet? Because some of
They
these,
said they were-
some of
Yeah,
those
that's-
could be covered in some of those workshops.
That's what's in your last copy of the school
Of the
news.
school news?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All the available,
whole-
all the available ones are gonna be listed. It's pared down from what it has been in years past,
Sure.
only because of the circumstances of this year, but.
Because if there's some things in there that we're looking at, we could point people to go there first,
Mhm.
and then pick some things that are not covered with the convention, that we could cover as a board retreat. Just a thought there.
And I believe the school news has got them broken down by different categories,
Okay.
rather than this day or this day or this day or whatever. And because I know there's been in the past where you've had some where you have the workshop on Wednesday, then there's another one that goes along with it on Thursday as well, in case you didn't make the one, you can make it to the other. So.
Unfortunately, I'm right in the middle of grant writing for transportation, so I haven't looked completely entirely at the school news yet. It's on my desk.
Well, why don't we do this to start? Mary Kay can investigate, we'll take the survey, talk about that tabulation of results and kind of our final report where we stand. Who can share that with us, and then we will ask, in the meantime, you can look at the convention offerings, and we will ask if there's one about starting to look at a referendum and just see what their suggestion would be. and bring that back at next meeting. Is that okay?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's good.
Did you get all that, Mary Kay?
Got it.
She's on top of it.
Okay, we'll go on to item C, district snow day expectations.
I'm actually pretty excited about this, and no, not excited to have a snow day necessarily, but,
Nice.
because we are now one-to-one, learning doesn't have to cease on a snow day, and it is getting colder, so it's the right time to discuss this. So what we are suggesting is this. We would communicate far enough ahead of time, starting tomorrow, if you are in agreement, but we would communicate to staff, students, and families, because everyone would have to prepare for the difference. That certified staff, we are suggesting they have an option, depending upon where they live and their internet service. It might be just as well, or they prefer to come into work. But if not, they could work from home that day. Support staff, however, would not experience a change. They do not report to work. They would not be asked to work remotely. And in the handbook, it does say if they would like to be paid for that day, they would take an emergency day or a personal day. So that wouldn't change. Students then would know that they are expected to log into Canvas when they are home. It's not a free day in pajamas, well, maybe pajamas, but not a free day anymore. That they would be expected to log into Canvas, and obviously a 4K student is going to look very different than a sophomore. But complete the, Amy, what did you call it, an e-learning day?
Correct.
Thank you. They would complete their e-learning activities, assignments for that day, and that would be an expectation. And then we would communicate that to everyone ahead of time, and then we count those minutes for DPI's required minutes of instruction that we report each spring. And then you all would never have to approve an amended school calendar because there would be no reason to add days in June. I can see you're as excited as I am.
That's a great plan.
It
It really
is,
is.
finally.
It's a great plan, but it, there's some excitement about having a snow day.
There is.
Having a day off, it's-
Some,
There is.
are you kidding?
And it wouldn't look the same as a regular day. We would not expect any student to be in front of a device for 8 hours, certainly, but,
Yeah, so that student can be up and be done with a few
Correct.
hours of the e-learning, and they'd be able to go out and enjoy that snow day.
Shovel.
and shovel, yes. We did borrow from Stevens Point's plan the thought that teachers they should have it ready to go at the first forecast of impending bad weather. But by 9:00 a.m., we want students to be able to log on, and we would advertise that. 9 is your starting time, your earliest starting time, so that they know it'll be there for them at that time. Okay, that's what we'll do then. Thank you.
Clint?
Fred,
Yes.
could we just ask Bailey what are your thoughts on it?
Nothing like being put on the spot.
Yeah, right.
Personally, I think that a snow day is a nostalgic event for students. Not just at the high school level, but the elementary level. And I think in like a time where we are right now with coronavirus and everything's changing, and actually there have been talk among students about what we were going to do about snow days, and some students were wondering if we were going to be e-learning on those days. And students like myself who chose to do in-person learning because we do not have reliable internet access are wondering if we're going to be compromised on those days. So that's one concern I have. So I would just ask you to consider that, but obviously whatever you guys think is necessary.
what I would, and what we will communicate with staff, Bailey, is that we're not looking to, stick it to any student. We want learning to continue, but it shouldn't be the heaviest load of the year. It should be manageable and not a reasonable time frame. So with your internet, it might feel kind of funny if you can't access something, but it wouldn't move you back, so to speak, with your standing in class, no.
We also talked about having teachers have materials that might be available to students that they can take home prior, so that we do have that case. And this also prevents us having to make up minutes if we have lots of snow days. So instead of adding days to our calendar in June.
Yeah, what happens on a day when, in March, when we get the big ice storm and everybody loses their power? Are we calling that a school day or a snow day?
Well, when we were referencing the Stevens Point plan, they did have like an extenuating circumstances, like it has to be noted as an e-learning day. So let's say there is something where the power is out in the majority of our area, then that might be called as an inclement weather day and no obligation. But thinking back in the past, we've had some anomalies where we've had multiple snow days or cold days where we could have had some learning opportunities where it was safe to venture out and buses travel and whatnot. This would alleviate that need for extra days in June.
So we'd still have the 3 days built in that, yeah.
Enough wiggle room.
And so pretty much all of the time we're thinking that you're gonna be able to tell kids, oh, tomorrow might be a snow day, so
You craft,
take your stuff
take your
home.
stuff.
Yes.
If you think the internet's going to be a problem, here's something that you can do as an alternate activity.
And I checked with Mark, for our remote learners, there wouldn't be any change. There's no reason even to communicate with them, other than you're still on that day. And Mark said today that he can send a message just to in-person learners, so that, a remote learner knows that it is typical for him or her. So,
Okay,
thank you.
so we will move along with that.
Yes.
And we'll go on to district educator effectiveness survey results.
Okay, so you have 3 attachments uploaded here. And in a short while, I'll have some help presenting. But to start, if you would open that first attachment, these are the results some of you recall from last year. Last year, if we hit, I think it was a 30% response rate, UW-Milwaukee would partner with Educator Effectiveness and they would give us a district report. So last year at this time, I shared our district scores with you. And, it's a pretty lengthy report. The meat of it is how we scored. So let's see, if you would turn to page 7, for example. You can see that our scores are in yellow numbers there. So feedback usefulness, Antigo School District teachers gave it a 3 out of 4. But what bothers me is that we're in the first quartile. So we're always looking to improve. Now the next one, feedback accuracy, and this would be a teacher's perception of his or her evaluator's feedback. Is it accurate? That one was higher at a 3.3, but still in the first quartile. We did better if you look at the last 2, a 3.3 and using feedback to improve, and that's in the second quartile, and then teacher collaboration. So while these results are not knocking our socks off, we did improve from last year. So that's where I would show you the second attachment is just a short chart comparing our results from 2018-19 and 19-20. Now, our response rate went down. We had 50%, which during a COVID closure, we're okay with. But keep in mind, some of our elementary schools then had about 10 people take a survey, and that really impacts our results for that school, obviously. But anyway, we did move up, albeit not tremendously. We did improve on staff feeling they had enough time and support to complete their educator effectiveness. We did improve on using feedback to improve their instruction. We improved a bit in trust between teachers and principals. Job satisfaction, that one we almost hit the second quartile, but just shy of it. And then commitment to school. So as educators, we would not be doing our jobs though if we just presented one snapshot of data and then walked away from it. I would liken it to a student who takes the forward exam in 4th grade, let's say. And for whatever reason, maybe he had a headache or maybe he didn't sleep the night before. He does really poorly in the reading portion. If we put all of our eggs in that forward exam basket and said, he's a struggling reader, we need to provide intervention, and we kind of labeled him based on that one data point, we'd really be bad at our jobs. So while we look at these results, what we want to do is really triangulate data. In other words, we have to continuously improve. How will we use what our teachers are telling us to improve? That's really where we can be impactful. So knowing that, I would draw your attention then to the third attachment. You're getting a sneak preview this evening. I will have help from Amy, Heidi, and April Schofield is on the telephone this evening. So what we want to do is go through a short summary of how we will use that survey data to improve. The work that we're sharing with you tonight really stems from the RPIC grant, and you've known about that we're year 2 now, but we're really starting to get into the work to help us improve, and we're coached by April is our internal coach, and then Katie Ryan from CISA 9. And we've had some really good sessions lately on continuous improvement. So with that, I'll just draw your attention. We always start with the mission and vision in mind. So those are the first couple pages. And you recall approving those, and we did a little exercise with sticky notes, and the center of our work is on equity, so that we meet the needs of each and every child. So you'll see that permeated throughout this too. As you'll see in the collective commitments, every staff went through those multiple times, and then we agreed as a full district on 7 of them. It's pretty intense work, but necessary work. So beginning with the end in mind, so this is page, I guess we don't have pages, but you'll see 10 gray boxes there. April, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly. Would you walk us through this portion, April?
Sure. So first I want to say thank you for having me and allowing me to join by phone. That's been very helpful for me today. So it's a little awkward not seeing my face, but I'm also watching you on YouTube. So technology is amazing. But thanks for having me. And I wanted to start out by beginning with the end in mind. I created a visual to help you get a better idea of the work that we've already done in our district, and to focus on how we will utilize data, including the EE data, and where we are headed with continuous improvement. So first, I wanted to point out that as Julie mentioned, we are really focused on embedding equity in all that we do. That's why we have that arrow throughout the middle that just says equity anchors all the work in our learning community, and that's a big key piece of our inclusive communities plan. But really, this work started last year, as she said, as we developed our mission, vision, and our commitment. And at the same time, last year, our DLT was learning about equity and realized that we had a lot of work to do. So in addition to building the foundation of our PLC to make this inclusive practices and equity work happen, we realized we needed to restructure our SLT, which is our school leadership team, to help facilitate bidirectional communication across our system, and to help guide professional learning, and also to collect data about how our system is functioning. So in that year of growth that we had last year, which was just a time for our district leadership team to grow and learn through the grant process, we also realized that we needed to prioritize and provide focus to our system, which is why we chose this year to move forward with the continuous improvement model. So last year we had, like I said, a lot of learning, and then this summer it was a good opportunity for the school leadership team to do some of that learning too, and for the district leadership team to gather all kinds of data and start the continuous improvement process. So this fall, we've been working on strengthening the foundation of the PLC through district and school continuous improvement planning. We have worked really hard, like Julie said, with Katie Ryan, my coach through CISA 9, to help us get through that process and make sure that we are doing this in a way that not only supports stakeholder input from staff, but also helps support and cover all bases as far as some other planning that we need to do through Title I and AGR, which you probably have heard of too. So we've worked really hard to create some district and school level plans. In November at the TD Days, we'd like to roll out some drafts of our continuous improvement plan that you're going to see today. You get a sneak peek. And then the staff is also going to continue to do some learning about equity through its ICS equity module, which is Integrated Comprehensive Systems for Equity, which I'm going to help you learn more about in the future too. So although we've just started this work in November, every year from now on, we'd like to make a commitment to continuous improvement and plan every summer. So in the summer of 2021, we will take another look at that data and make plans that support the learning of each and every student and the well-being of staff in there as well. So in 2021 and 2022, we'll continue our learning, continue our data collection, and continue to monitor our progress so that we always can make sure that we are keeping a close eye on how our system is improving through this continuous improvement model. Then once again, in the summer of 2022, we'll take a look at data and continue this planning. In 22-23, we're planning to start to shift to a more inclusive learning environment where we have co-plan, co-serve, co-learn teams, and that is part of the plans that you'll see today too. Once again, in summer 2023, we'll continue with our continuous improvement planning, always planning for equity, so that in 23 and 24 and beyond, we are at a point where we can just have more equitable systems and see learning for each and every student. But I think the one thing I want you to know as we're going through this continuous improvement process is that we are really dedicated to making sure that we're monitoring progress all the way through, including the progress of our EE data, so that we know that we are doing whatever it takes to adjust and strengthen our system as needed based on what the data shows. So then I have another slide that I wanted to share with all of you. Can you see it on the next page? This is kind of awkward. All right, so to connect the work and to connect it to some of the EE data that you wanted to see and learn about, I want you to know that as we think about continuous improvement, keep in mind that we utilize many different data sources to drive the creation of our continuous improvement plan, including PLC fidelity rubric data, district capacity data, and the EE data, and that's just to name a few data sources, and that's why we're here today, so we can discuss the EE data and how it is used to drive our work. So that being said, know that it's a little bit late this year. Our continuous improvement, like I said, will occur this summer in the future, our planning. But this is something like we're continuously trying to get better at, so that's why it's a little bit different this year. But I do want you to know that we worked really tirelessly to determine how to best continue to pull everything together, and that's really so we can develop a clear and focused plan so that we can achieve that vision of learning success for each and every student and a sense of belonging for both students and staff moving forward. So that being said, we're using a lot of different data, but today Julie is going to share some information about how that educator effectiveness data is connected to our continuous improvement plan.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So the next slide we think is really succinct and will help you put it all in context. So the survey results that we shared this evening, what's the purpose? Why do we take that survey? And I think they summed it beautifully. This process is derived from research done in Wisconsin that shows the importance of the educator effectiveness process for determining teacher perceptions of the quality of feedback they receive, their principals' leadership, and even how satisfied they are with their job. And you can see the flow chart there at the bottom. So when you look at that, those indicators, number one, that's one of the main reasons that when I shared with you, staff was feeling really stressed about many things, including educator effectiveness. So what we did is we took the most important parts of it under Amy's leadership, and we condensed it and streamlined it for them, wanting to eliminate some of that stress. But we weren't comfortable recommending to the board, don't do it, because it is simply too important that we all continue to improve. I fear that would have sent a terrible message, unintended message, mind you, to our public. We know we have to improve, but we're cognizant of the stressors we're all under right now. So when you look at the purpose of this survey, then we can move on to, and you'll see the next plan, or the next slide, how to incorporate that data. So we'll present to you the first draft tonight of our district plan, and it will have 3 parts. Since you hired me 3 years ago, it's no secret I've been consumed by that first part, student achievement. Our report card from 2 years ago was very concerning. We all know we have to improve student achievement. I 100% believe we're on the right track to do that. And the last time we talked about it, I think it was my evaluation, Danny, and you had said, you know, how can the board help with that? And I would offer you're doing it right now, you know, by knowing what the plan is and investing in the plan. That's one part of it. But how else can student achievement improve? Through school conditions, right? Teachers who are invested and share the belief in this work, and they're more likely then to have their craft positively affected than if they're distraught and uninvested. And finally, leadership. There were a lot of indicators in that survey that talk about trust in principals, communication, and we know that's a significant piece too. So we will present to you a draft of 3 goals this evening, and then what will schools do? Their goals will be a microcosm of what we are doing as a district. So every school will be looking at its own student achievement data, its own school conditions, and measuring its own leadership indicators. So that's a long intro, and now we'll get to what are these drafts. Well, the first one, the red box around student achievement, won't surprise you because you've heard something similar before. To improve outcomes for each and every student by August 2024, the USDA will meet or exceed state proficiency levels on the following state assessments: the Forward Exam, ACT Aspire, and ACT in the areas of reading and math. It's a lofty goal because you know in many cases we are not near the state average. So we have a lot of work to do. We gave ourselves some time. And notice we took on math as well. We've been focused on reading for the last 2 years, especially at the elementary and middle school level. That doesn't mean that we're ignoring math. It means that we're intentionally putting only as much on teachers' plates as they can handle. But it's no secret we have to tackle math next.
Julie, just so I'm clear on this, proficiency is not the same as the state average.
Correct. That's a good point. Proficiency on state assessments, there is typically the categories are minimal, which is your most at risk, basic, and then proficiency is that level by which we strive for every child to hit. And then there's advanced. So Andy, your point is that wherever that state average lies, we want to meet or exceed it, but it wouldn't always be in that proficient level most likely. You're right.
The state average, correct me if I'm wrong, but the state average isn't, kids aren't in proficient.
It's a percent of proficient. That's how it's so.
A percent
let's say
of
it's let's say the
proficiency?
state average, the state is 40% 40% of the students are in proficient. That's not saying 40% of the students
No,
are proficient.
40% are proficient or above.
It's the percentage of, maybe we're saying the same thing, I don't know, but they're not saying that students are at proficiency. It's the percentage of proficiency. So like we had 26%
So are we saying
proficient.
here that we will have students will be in the proficient level, or are we just saying our average will be in the proficiency level?
Proficient level.
We'll get clarity to make sure this is really clear, but we
Yeah.
don't want just state average because that's not good enough.
I think I know, and that's where you are saying the same thing. Our state average is not commendable. It isn't admirable, but as Megan Murphy, you've heard me say, she's kind of my data go-to. When she helped me look at our results last time, she said it gives us a starting point. That first tier should be to close the gap between Antigo and the state in many of these areas. But we can't stop that. I would be doing a disservice as the leader if I said that's good enough. It isn't, and that's where we're speaking the same language.
Well, I am one for saying we should have a achievable goal, a realistic, achievable goal. And as long as you're comfortable that you have selected an achievable goal here, I'm good with it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think if we had students who were proficient, that would be a huge improvement for Anna.
It would. Okay. So then I will turn it over to Amy, who will talk to you about school conditions, which is our second goal.
So if you look at, I believe it's slide 10, you can see the school conditions goal in draft form currently is to increase trust amongst all stakeholders by August 2024. We will build and implement a framework to transform our school community as measured yearly by the EE survey and the U Chicago survey. So to talk a little bit about that, our schools have already actually written their school conditions goal to align with our overarching goal. A lot of our SLT teams, we walk them through this continuous improvement process with a template to talk about a goal for the schools. And a lot of times that involved relationship building activities within the school for staff to staff. It might include staff to student, it might include staff to parent or caregiver, and it also might include, when I say staff to staff, I'm also including leadership in there too. So we worked through that already at each of the building levels, and they have their goals in draft form too to support this district. school conditions goal. The U Chicago survey is a new survey to us. We have not taken it yet. It is provided to us through the grant and something we are asked to do. So we will be taking that in this winter. And it has a lot of questions that are similar to the EE survey, talking about trust, systems, communication. So when we talk about that triangulation of data, that would be a second point for us to kind of see if we're hearing similar data from one survey to another, and then also help us reframe each summer when we grow our school conditions goal and measure and continuously improve. So each school will work to have systems in place to create and foster those relationships and just some consistent and cohesive messaging within the buildings, which also then filter up into our district goal. It's really to improve that feeling of belonging, really using that language from our mission and vision about that sense of belonging and authentic, supportive relationships. So then the last and third goal of our continuous improvement plan is our leadership goal, and Heidi will talk a little bit about that.
So just to give you a little idea, we broke into teams when we were developing and really digging into our data, and so that's kind of how we shifted out where we had different leadership. So actually this goal has been gone over multiple times, and Clint and Tom were on our team together to refine this, and then we bring it back to the big team to talk about it. So just so you kind of know the process of how we determined and came up with some of these goals based on the data that we had. But our leadership goal is using a continuous improvement framework. We will use data to inform our decision making and monitor our progress in the areas of communication and feedback throughout the system as measured by the EE staff survey, the PLC fidelity rubric, and the district capacity assessment. And what you'll see is what's really important to us is that a lot of the data points that we're using to triangulate are the same that we're using for our school conditions and for achievement. And that's purposeful because we don't need and we don't want a bunch of different things that are measuring different things. We've really worked hard to try to align this work. It just might be measured in each area by different indicators that we want to show growth in. And the only different one is the district capacity assessment, which is really a systems level look through the grant that we do each year to see if what our leadership thinks about our movement within our system. And then, so each of these pieces brings a little bit of a different look so that we can triangulate and say, yeah, staff are saying it here, staff are saying it here, and we're seeing the same thing. So those are the things that we're going to focus on so that it's really cohesive and coherent when we share that out. But that's how the leadership role came about. But,
Thank you. So we share this with you tonight. Staff has been involved in, the equity work now. Again, this is a second year, but from, I would say, the peripheral level. Starting this year now, they'll get into the actual learning that leadership has already completed, and in some cases, going through a second time, like we did at Colt today. And so we'll share this draft of these goals with staff, and then through their school leadership teams will involve growing that capacity. And our hope is in years to come, you as a board will simply see cohesive growth and improvement in how we've articulated, but we've not been able to put into practice, that notion of everyone pulling in the same direction. And I think that's very exciting. So, any questions from you? And then, of course, on the last slide, we wanted to thank you because, again, you're our governing body that hopefully will endorse this work and see the results.
Okay. Any comments on any of this from the board?
And as April said, we're going to keep you in the loop the whole way, like your involvement in mission and vision, and there are checkpoints that are specifically written into the grant to make sure the board is involved. So we'll be back before you again.
Go forth and let's see those as student achievement goals.
Yeah. And we'll check that language and get back to you.
Okay. We'll go on to item E there. Consideration of the 2021 staff compensation.
I'm going to turn this over to Tim, but what you'll see here this evening are for support staff and custodial, the custodial department. We brought you certified staff compensation changes earlier and then took them off the agenda when it was time to talk about the tax levy. So you've already seen certified staff. Now this evening you'll see support staff, and then at the end of the month is when we would ask for approval. Okay, Mr. Prenti.
Before Tim starts, Mary, let the record reflect that I recuse myself from discussion.
So Melanie put together 2 documents for you tonight, Melanie Ryan, and I want you to open up the one that's titled, I think it's the older one from 2019, 2019. Let me get the right title, but anyway, this is just an example of the various schedules we work with. And it's a little complex from which employees are under which schedule, and it has to do with hire date. And as you can imagine, when you're working the same job, maybe in the same office or in the same classroom, and somebody, because they were hired maybe a year before you, is receiving considerably different compensation, it can create for hard feelings. And then within the support staff group, we have schedules for food service, we have schedules for secretary IAs, and we have schedules for custodians. So we have multiple combinations of schedules, and none of them were built kind of on the same basis. Each group might have at one point in time years ago had a particular interest in mind, and that's carried over from in that group. And what we're trying to do in that first document, if you open that one, is kind of standardize the groups. So all the group schedules will look very similar. The rates of increase with longevity, we applied longevity differently within each group on the old schedules. And we're going to try to apply that uniformly across all schedules. Now in the custodial group, the oldest, the longest tenured staff, their schedule doesn't meet cleanly with this current configuration. And I would say right now there's roughly about half of the custodial housekeeping staff on the, what I would say the newer schedule, and half of the staff on the old schedule. And we haven't had lengthy conversations about how we might move this old group to this new group. But let me pull that document open and we'll just briefly touch on it. So essentially what we're trying to do is we're trying to, like in the first section, you can see the positions that relate to this schedule. And we're suggesting that as we place people on this schedule, they would get at least a minimum of the CPI, which is 1.81%. And the old system was based on the classification of employee you were. And then we had a step system that would, depending on your evaluation, you might be able to, within a classification, go up 1 step, 2 steps, and you could do that annually. So if you had a supervisor that was good at doing evaluations, understood the motivation to try to get you moving along the pay scale, you could move along at a reasonable clip. If unfortunately you were a person that got into a building where there might have been high turnover rate, either in the principal or in your supervisor, or there was possibly some neglect in doing an evaluation, you might be on the same step for multiple years. And so that was kind of a shortcoming. It wasn't really the employee's fault. It may have been the supervisor's fault why they didn't move. And some of the schedules had that in it, some of them didn't. So now we're just saying, let's base it, the pay scale on longevity and the various classifications. So I think with that, I'll just stop and see if there are questions that the board might have on the simplicity of it. In general, I would say we have not changed the starting wage in any one of the positions because adding CPI plus placing people on the schedule is cost prohibitive in the first year. But classification 4 is our special education IAs. And we've experienced some reasonably high turnover rate in that position. And Heidi has encouraged us to add something there, so I think we're adding roughly 50 cents, maybe a little more than that, to that starting IA special education aid. And then you can see the, we're suggesting that we would start with approximately 50 cents at each one of those steps. And historically, between 15 and 20 years, there's been a longevity award there of $1. And we have staff that have been here 12, 13, 14 years, and they're looking forward to that. So I think we felt for consistency that that was something that we were going to keep in place. When I did the costing of it, I would like to spend a little more time with Dr. Sprague going over the rules of placement. So Melanie's been working on this for over a year, but actually placing people on the schedule is where kind of the rubber meets the road. And we want to be very clear about how you go from whatever schedule you are currently on to this simplified version of the current schedule, the adopted schedule. And when I look at some reasonable estimates, CPI is going to cost us something, but comparison from last year to placing people on this year's schedule for the top 5 classifications is about $30,000. So, and I haven't subtracted CPI from that. I was working on that this afternoon, but we'll have that ready to go for you at the board meeting so you know what kind of cost that's going to be for us.
Can you clarify, so that potentially it's CPI and then plus 50 cents on the base?
I would say, Heidi, no, that's not quite accurate. Yep.
So it's,
What was the question?
So I would say what Heidi's question is, CPI is 1.81. I think if I had recalling today, and I'd want to verify it, but I think we're looking at a 2.4% increase going from the current rate to the new current starting rate. So it's a little higher than CPI, but not significant.
I had just asked if it was CPI plus 50 cents, and it's not, that's not exactly how it's being calculated.
No.
It's 2.4 total.
Yeah.
And I would just like to commend Tim and Melanie prior to my becoming involved. When he talked about the 3 schedules not having any consistency or commonalities, and the disparity between the, what I would call the old and the new custodial schedule, there were some really blatant negative aspects to those. It was a mess, quite frankly. So I'm proud of the work that they've done to streamline. It'll give, I feel, our employees some positive to look forward to, knowing where they stand, why they stand there, and what they can do to advance. So.
You know, it's really unfortunate when you think of when you look at a wage per hour, it looks like a lot. But, you know, we're asking our IAs to do their typical day at 7.5 hours. And some of them now, because of COVID, they're working 4 days a week. You know, so you're talking about people that are making, you know, that $20,000 to $25,000 a year mark working for the district. And certainly they can get employment opportunities outside the district. But it's important for us to retain employees. And, we have to compensate to the point where at least we're an attractive alternative to some of the big box stores or something like that.
And they're doing some really hard work. I can only speak for RAs.
All right, I hope I got the figures right here. So an instructional assistant is gonna start out at, on the schedule that's here, $14 an hour, and they can work their way up to $17 an hour, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, a custodian starts out at $15.97 an hour and can go up to $17.81 an hour. That's on your next, on the salary schedule for, it's on
The
page
proposed
1.
schedule, yeah, it's $18.97.
Okay.
Yep.
I would think that the IA should at least be up to the same level as your custodians. Because when I had an IA in my room when I was teaching at the high school, and those people are invaluable. You know, they're dealing with students in some pretty unfavorable conditions a lot of times. They got some really tough work to do. And I'm not saying the custodians don't. I mean, they work their hearts out and they're valuable. But I would think our IA should be at least worth as much as a custodian. Because I don't know of any custodian who's going to get punched by a student or get sued by a parent. You know, your chances are as an IA of having a situation like that are a lot more, you know, the chances are a lot greater. So.
What I'll do in the meantime, I know that the, 2
Tim,
years ago,
can you
we
speak
had
up,
a,
please? My
salary-
hearing stinks.
2 years ago, we had a salary survey done with, Merrill Schools actually ran it. And I'll look at comparables and make sure that we're in line with the survey. We're currently working with the Wausau School District, is trying to get all the Valley schools to pull live data and have comparable by classification. So, not that we have to necessarily match, but we certainly want to be competitive in each classification.
I understand that, but when you think about the work that a custodian does and the work that an IA does, I think they should at least be at the same level.
What is the turnover rate on custodians versus the turnover rate on IAs?
I
would
think,
say our IA turnover has slowed, which is good. The last, I would say, 2 years, my first 2 years, I was spending most of my time hiring, and that hasn't really happened. They're when they come, they stay, and yeah, we need to pay them, and this is a good step in the right direction, but they are enjoying their work and the people that they work with, which is really clear.
As a temporary positive, I would offer that, remember as we talked to the board about if a teacher is out on quarantine, often it's an IA who will step physically into that class and supervise. And we didn't want to take advantage of them, so we agreed to pay them $3 an hour more than their current wage when that applies. Larry, we met the superintendent-elect of Flambeau, asked all CESA 9 principals, what are you doing? Because his feedback was suggesting that they should do something like that. The results that came in, probably 7 districts responding, we were the only one who had increased compensation for our IAs. So I felt very proud of that.
Well, I know whenever I sub, and I haven't subbed for a while, but when I did, if I was in a special ed classroom, I would always tell the IA, you tell me what you want me to do, because you're here every day and I'm just a sub. I'm just a warm body. And those people step up. They're incredible. And I really think that they should at least be making as much as a custodian.
I agree with you, Wayne.
Hey, Tim, what is in the classification difference between a behavioral support instructional assistant and a special ed instructional assistant?
I'll let Heidi speak to that.
Yeah.
Behavioral support is a new position we started this year.
So last year was the first year that we did that, and that was at the direction, kind of out from the board, and we used AGR funds. their regular ed IAs. So Tina Krog and Maggie Spindler. Tina's at East and West and Maggie is at North. And Jerry, that was it added this year. So the last year was those two at elementary, and then Jerry Stager moved from special ed into a behavior support role for regular ed. And so they're funded, I'm not sure if Jerry's funded, but I know the other two are funded at BGR. And that was just additional supports for moving forward in our behavior pathway and just for all students, not just special education. I'm not sure, I couldn't pull up the salary schedule, so I know that because we were looking for more specific skill set, that the wage was higher.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Okay, as long as Mike asked that, on the custodial employees, housekeeping, what is their job, what do the housekeepers do?
I think the biggest distinction is a housekeeper is tasked with cleaning classrooms, cleaning the facility. Let's use the middle school or the high school as an example, where you're charged with setup, you're charged with dealing with the community, maybe helping a game manager manage for an event. That's custodial, that's a little additional responsibility that the custodian has. You're also charged with knowing operational systems of the buildings, things like.
All right, that's the custodian, right?
That's the custodian.
Okay.
The housekeeper is charged with just cleaning.
Cleaning,
Not
okay.
just, but with cleaning and with painting duties, that kind of thing.
And are housekeeping positions like during the school day, or are they after school?
They're typically all second shift.
Second shift, okay. And who's the groundskeeper, or what is that? Is there only one for the district?
Only one.
And their job is to mow lawn,
Snow removal.
snow removal? Okay,
They're also taking care of all the outdoor athletic fields, probably the big one.
And again, all of those people, they're invaluable, but they're all making a lot more than any instructional assistant who's in a classroom. And I think that,
And I think, Wayne, I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong.
well, I know, and I know.
The market, like when you look at the groundskeeper, you're comparing someone that is an equipment operator. And one would argue that maybe they're not a heavy equipment operator, but when you think of removing snow, you're competing against the trade that does that for an occupation.
Right,
And that's the,
I understand that.
Yeah.
You know, but what I'm saying is the people who are dealing with the students who need extra help, I think they
They're in
should
the
be worth a little,
trenches.
I think they should get a little bit more. I think they should at least be brought up to the minimum that that a house cleaning personnel gets. Because a lot of times, some of these people are changing diapers and feeding and
feeding tubes and in the cafeteria, and food's getting thrown all over, and, you
Yeah.
know,
it's a tough job.
very tough job.
So, Tim, are you going to be able to bring us some information from other districts on what their pay scale is?
I can say that it might be a year or two out of date because the Wausau survey has not been completed yet. But I can certainly get you data that's probably 12 to 18 months old.
Yeah, and this is a good discussion because this is what the market will bear, sort of thing, you know, can we hire somebody? The other question I might ask here, what percentage of our custodians are female and what percentage of our instructional aides are female?
Almost all the instructional assistants are female.
And I think you know where I'd be going with that
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so we'll leave that at that.
As long as I've been, I can only think of one male instructional assistant, that was Jim Eisman at the high school. There may have been others.
Yeah, we never, elementary, there were no at that,
Yeah,
There are some.
before, now there are, yeah.
yeah, okay. Well, like I said, I haven't been in the buildings for a while, but
Mhm.
still, I think, you know, and again, the final word about the IAs, they love the kids,
Mhm.
you know? You talk to any one of them and they just love those kids. And that should be worth a little bit more too.
Okay, other than that issue, anything else on this for Tim?
Other than a spelling error, no.
You can take that up with him later.
I'll take that up with Tim.
Okay, so that was just for discussion, and it'll be coming back. And we'll move on to a review of the amended budget notice.
So I don't want to get too granular. Right now I'm working on, normally we adopt the budget at the time we do the levy, and we amend it. There are things that we're working through right now, like, as an example, today we just got notification of AGR. So we know what our allocation is for AGR, so we're going to be changing revenues for the AGR, and then we'll adjust the AGR budget to reflect those additional revenues that we receive. I'm also going through and looking at, we had a discussion at Colt this morning, I'm looking at fees and admissions and the impact COVID has had on those. And as an example, we typically budget $15,000 in gate fees. And we have one big pot for Fund 10, and that $15,000 goes into Fund 10 receipts. And we show that. Well, we haven't had gate receipts for volleyball or football. Conversely, we haven't been paying out wages for ticket takers and in some cases, game managers. So our expenses are down. But when I looked at it earlier, that's between fees and admissions, you're in excess of $100,000. That is likely probably not to be there this year. And I'll have those figures trued up by the next meeting in November.
Okay. Okay, we will move on to action items, and item E is Neola 29-2 and technical corrections, first reading.
I move the board approve the first reading of Neola Policy Update 29-2 and technical corrections.
Second.
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion on any of it? Okay, all those in favor of approving the first reading, signify by saying
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes. And then consideration to approve the 2020-2021 MTC dual credit agreement.
I move the board approve the 2020-2021 NTC dual credit service agreement as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, any questions or comments on this? My only question was, I'm not sure if it was last year or the year before, we started with MTC where kids could do a whole a set of classes, so they would get some kind of a certificate, or and I think the one we did was nursing assistant, but I think we did one in welding too. I'm just wondering how those are going and if we're adding any more.
We looked at all different certificates that NTC can, or that students can earn at NTC. And right now, as of last Friday, we've gotten a list of courses that they need to get certain certificates, and then a list of courses that we offer at Anago as far as dual credit options. So we've got the possibility of courses and the courses that we offer now in a side-by-side comparison. And I'm meeting with a couple of the teachers next week to take a look at that and see how we can bridge that gap a little closer. But it would mean if we do offer a different dual credit course, it would mean the subtraction of something else. We did do the CNC machining, and that hasn't been very popular as far as students are concerned. As far as industry is concerned, it's high in demand. But to try to get students to be taking that CNC course has been a struggle.
Okay.
So we're trying to bridge that, but it's a process that we're not, our desire from students is not necessarily matching industry demands in some cases.
And so do you sit down with the industry and discuss with them what they think it would take to get students to be interested in this? Or express what you think it would take for industry to do to get students interested?
We've gone a couple different routes with that. The short answer to that is yes. But we've had some businesses come in and give presentations on what opportunities are available within their company. COVID obviously has offered some different obstacles in making those conversations happen. But we've been in discussions about a virtual career fair or offering one in the spring. We're electing to move towards the spring one in hopes that we can maybe do an outdoor one or something to get that personal connection, and we could maybe add like a summer job fair type of thing to try to serve some of the demands of the industry for summer jobs, and also provide that opportunity for students to be able to earn some cash during the summer and maybe find something that they're interested in. Those are our talks right now.
If I could just interject, Mr. Rogers at the high school expressed that October was manufacturing month, and we went over it over the announcements every day, almost every day. And I think it did spark some discussion between students and making the classes that you take to get into that industry a lot more visible. So there has been some that.
And we would tell a little bit about the career or technical certificate that you needed, and then accompany it with the starting salary, the average starting salary of that position. I'm glad it sparked some conversation.
I'm just wondering if industry locally here is, kids have a lot of options, directions they can go, and they see a lot of different starting salaries. And if industry, I know some industries, I think, oh, your starting salary is a little low, I could get that anywhere. So I just wonder if you have those kind of discussions with them.
We haven't had discussions of specific starting salaries, but some of them are fairly high, like 53,000. I know was one we threw out, another one was 46,000 for a starting salary with a technical diploma that could possibly be free.
Is Gailey, from your perspective, do students look at that and say, oh, that sounds really good?
Yes, actually, compared to, for example, attending a four-year university, receiving that education versus receiving a certificate at NPC, even though the jobs are dissimilar, the starting salaries are often pretty comparable to each other.
And you don't fork out that money for 4 years. Okay.
We're trying.
All right. So that was MT dual credit. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And then Start College Now.
I move the board approve the students' enrollment in the Youth Options Start College Now program for spring 2021 as presented.
Second that.
Can I just clarify one thing on that? The youth options is the old language for Start College Now and the Early College Credit Program. And the difference between the Early College Credit Program and Start College Now is that the Early College Credit Program allows students to take classes via the UW system, like the Human Development and Astronomy that you see on with UWSP, and then the Start College Now is with any technical college, which are the rest of the classes that you see on that list.
Okay.
So I apologize for that language in there, but I just wanted to be.
Should the motion reflect that language that you just gave, dropping that youth options and adding the
early college credit program and Start College Now.
If Mary changes her motion, I will second it.
Okay, should I,
No pressure.
okay, so I just redo it?
Just amend.
Amend?
Yeah.
Okay, so I move the board approve the students' enrollment in the, come on,
Early college credit.
early college credits or Start College Now program for the spring of 2021 is presented.
I'll second that amendment.
Okay, any further discussion? And all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay,
Andy, you just approved the amendments, and now you gotta approve the motion.
okay, thank you, Danny.
Right, Mike? Help me out there.
Is that right? Yeah, okay. So now for the motion. Is there any further discussion? And all those in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed? Okay. And the last thing is to confirm that the next meeting will be Tuesday, December 8th. And with that, we would have a motion to adjourn.
So move.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Bye.